Hello everybody and welcome to my video on the transportation that I rode on in Turin on my great European adventure across France and Italy. Anyway, before I got to Turin, I had to finish off the journey between Lyon and Turin. So here I am arriving into the first station across the Italian border, which is Oulx, which I believe is where the Trenitalia local services to Turin begin, with French local services from Lyon terminating somewhere around Modane, maybe a little bit further on. Intriguingly, at Oulx there was a Flixbus waiting, so I'm unsure if Oulx gets a few more services by Flixbus than it does with the rail companies. Anyway, here I am arriving into Turin Porta Caesar, which is one of two major stations in the city. Here is this Trenitalia Express train. I believe it is part of the Rossa brand of trains, leaving Turin Porta Caesar heading towards Milan Central. Here I am now at Turin Porta Caesar, and well, this made me think Turin was actually quite a nice and quite clean city. Yeah, sure, there are a few bits of rubbish lying around the place, but a lot of European cities, especially on this trip, are slightly dirty. However, I was not ready to see the city that would become my home for the next 2 or 3 days. Anyway, to get to my hotel, which was the Novotel, at a random tram stop on the outskirts, I had to take the metro just a couple of stops to Porta Nuova, the other main railway station in the city. The Turin metro is actually a good piece of transportation in the city, and this would not be my only ride on the metro. Here I am arriving into Porta Nuova. The metro train continues on to Benghazi. Here I am exiting Porta Nuova metro station, which has been built alongside the massive and much older mainline station with the same name. I'd be using Porta Nuova mainline station at the end of my stay, when I move on to my next city of Genoa. However, first, to get to my hotel, I had to navigate Turin's extremely complicated and unsafe tram network. I didn't dislike the tram network, I just didn't feel extremely safe on this tram network, considering I think I was on the most dodgy and busy tram network of them all. Here I am arriving at the Scottolero tram stop, which is the random tram stop where my Novotel is located. Now the next day I did travel back into Turin on the tram network, and although I had seen Benno's video, by the way check out his channel, it is really good and he covers a lot of public transport across the globe, I wasn't prepared for how bad and knackered the Turin tram network is. The metro is pretty good, and although he got stuck on the metro because it finished at 8 o'clock when he was there for some reason, I did look at the network times, or the finishing times for the metro, and alongside the tram, the metro started and finished really late. Well, it started early, but it finished really late. Like some metro trains didn't finish until gone midnight on Friday and Saturday nights, which I thought was really good. So maybe they were doing some maintenance or something, or it's a Sunday when he was there, I'm not too sure. Anyway, here I'm going back into the city centre the next morning to check out more of the metro and tram network. This tram wasn't as knackered, but it was still really busy, but at least it had working announcements. Here I am arriving back into Porto to change onto the metro. Now Porto is probably the nicest tram stop, considering all of the others that I experienced were either smashed up, overgrown, or both, and the trams weren't much better to be honest, at least on tram line 4. This has got to be the worst tram line, although saying that it was also the busiest, so it's not surprising. Also, I think it was when I came back into Turin this day, but it could have been another day that I was here in the city, there was this massive load of fare evaders who got on the tram at some random tram stop, a couple tram stops into the city from Scottolero. And it just so happens there were ticket collectors on the tram checking your tickets. So everybody, or at least all of the fare evaders, got on the tram, quickly saw the fare checkers, and then got off the tram just as the doors were closing. I did feel unsafe then, but that is the only network I've ever experienced where there have been that amount of fare evaders. Honestly, you ought to come to Turin. It is a good city, it's just a little bit unsafe, and well, the tram network is something else, and so is the metro. Here I am on the metro, heading from Porto to Lingotto to check out the old Fiat factory there, and well, the metro is also something else. It is a masterpiece, especially for a city like Turin, where there are a large amount of fare evaders, at least on the tram network. The metro has had its fair share of problems though, but it does use mostly reliable rail trains from France. Here I am departing around a metro station. I'm not too sure which one this was since I couldn't really make out the announcements very well, although at least the metro did actually have proper functioning and pretty good announcements. As we leave the metro station, you're going to be able to see just how fast this VAL system really goes. Here is a VAL metro train heading the other way back into the city centre and out towards Fermi. Here I am arriving into Lingotto, which is the terminus of the metro for many years, until a couple of years ago it was extended just 2 stops down to Benghazi. Here I am now, walking around the Lingotto station, trying to find the exit, which to be honest was quite easy. And I know this used to be the terminus station, but this metro station was absolutely massive, considering that not many people seem to use it. Now, this was on a Sunday, I think, possibly a Saturday, but I think this was a Sunday. There weren't many people using it, which you would expect, but at the same time, the metro is a pretty vast system. Although it only contains one line, it goes right through the city centre and connects a few places across the city. So, yeah, I expected it to be busier, even though it was a Sunday. Although saying that, the Lingotto shopping centre had just only opened, which is the whole reason why I came here. And, well, that's the only purpose of the metro station. Anyway, here I am now at the old Fiat test track, which was kind of interesting, but they've kind of ruined it at the same time because it has these weird sculpture things on the top. Anyway, that's enough about Fiat, shopping centres, and why the metro should and isn't busier. Anyway, here I am arriving at the Lingotto mainline station. I wanted to go on a few more trains than what I had done in other cities, with the exception of Paris, of course. So here I am going on one of the suburban trains here in Turin, which might have actually originated in Orcs. I'm not too sure on that one. But I'm going to be taking this one stop to Turin Porta Susa. Here I am arriving back into Porta Sousa, where I had walked to a nearby tram stop. Here I am now, boarding the Heritage Tram Line 7 to head from Questura, located quite close by to Porta Sousa station, to head into the city centre. This tram only runs on Sundays or public holidays, and it is quite a nice tram route, although saying that the trams are pretty knackered to say the least. Here I am arriving into Castello, where tramline 7 has quite a large break. Here I am at the other Castello tram stop, which is not served by the Heritage 7 service. Now this is where Apple Maps really started to be kind of strange. And oh, here goes the number 7, this time going straight through. Now Apple Maps hadn't been great so far in Turin, but it had worked, albeit the departure times weren't as accurate as Google Maps, and some of the routes were actually non-existent or bus routes. And well, that was definitely the case for my next tram, Tramline 13, which had these rather weird 1990s trams. These trams are similar, but not the same to the old trams that used to operate on Tramline 1 in Paris, which is the whole reason why I wanted to go on them. They sounded really nice, but according to Apple Maps, they weren't trams. They were buses. Yeah, sure, it showed the tram route and the tram station, but alongside that, it also showed Tramline 13 as a bus route with live departures for the trams, but showing it as for the buses, which isn't really ideal. It's a good job we had Google Maps, as a lot of the tram stops, if not all of the tram stops, do not have live departure boards. Instead, they have these very old, historic, and extremely knackered, kind of old-fashioned paper departure boards, which only show the tram route as well as bus routes, not departures. here I am arriving at the Grand Madra tram stop, which is the terminus of tramline 13. Here comes another tram from the 1990s, arriving into Grand Madra, which will take me back into Turin city centre. The area around Castello is actually quite nice, although saying that it is where all the tourists go. But I would say it's the nicest part of Turin, and actually feels quite safe alongside the Grand Madra area around the tram stop. Whereas the areas alongside tramline 4, which I did walk part of, was not at all safe. Here is the interior of one of the 1990s trams. I quite like the interior. It's got a nice mixture of white, grey, blue on the ticket reader and yellow grab poles, which really do stand out, and is actually quite nice. As well as they also had some weird kind of tram departure thingy on the left hand side of the window, as you can see there. I'm not too sure what it was really for, but at least it hadn't actually been smashed up like the rest of the tram network. As you also saw in that interior shot, it had one of the new ticket readers, which can be used to scan your day or weekly pass if you choose to use it instead of fare evading, like most of the locals do. Here is one of the Ansaldo Grader, I think, 6000 series of tram arriving into Turin city centre to take me back to my hotel on tramline 4 at Scottolero. I believe, or it looked like, tramline 4 is the only tram route to use this type of tram, although other tram routes such as tramline 13 and 15 use the 5000 and some tramlines use the similar 7000 series of tram, which are also similar to the trams that used to be used on tramline T1 in Paris. However, I've also seen that there is a newer 8000 series of tram, which is newer than these Ansaldo Grader trams. I'm quite curious about the 8000 series tram, since they have a newer colour scheme similar to those seen on the bus network here in Turin. However, I didn't actually see any of the 8000 series of tram, although saying that there are videos of them out and about in the city, so either they avoided me or they've been having problems with them, which, to be honest, I wouldn't really be surprised about. God, I can't speak today.
How many stops? One.
After getting some shopping and spending one last night in the Novotel in Turin, which is actually quite nice, especially compared to the landscape around the hotel, here I am getting back on to tram line 4 to head back to Porto Nuova to head on my next train across to Genoa, which is also a very popular train service. This tram actually wasn't too busy, and the tram didn't look as knackered as what some of the other ones did, though it was still pretty poor. Although saying that, I think most of the fare evaders must not work or be scumbags or something, because, well, there weren't very many, if any, fare evaders on this tram, and overall this tram wasn't too busy at all. Here I am arriving into Porto Nuova on this not quiet, but was quiet when I got on it, tram. Here I am trying to find the entrance into Porto Nuova station, which, well, just like a lot of cities on this trip, unfortunately, smelt like wee. Ugh. Here I am now in the massive waiting hall here at Turin, Porto Nuova. A lot of Italian terminating stations, just like the station in Florence and Termini station in Rome. It has a massive, iconic waiting area, and to be honest, using this system kind of works, although it didn't really work very much here in Turin. In Florence, and I think they probably did the same in Rome as well, they would pull you to the platform a few minutes before your train got in. And well, the only reason why it didn't work here is because the train was already in, although saying that it didn't depart for quite a long time, so yeah, this system kind of worked. Here is one of the much older suburban Trenitalia trains leaving Turin Porto-Nuova. I wouldn't have minded a ride on one of these, unfortunately they escaped me this time round.
No, mi si ripassava la bici ogni volta, è difficile poi con tutte queste sacche. Mi si ribaltavano le bici però sono fuori commercio. Le sacche non si muovono troppo l'equilibrio. Non c'è nessuno che sta votando.
Raga, senza le mamme non abbiamo fatto la foto di Rita.
Facciamo la foto. Cioè, per farmi sempre presentate.
Foto per le mamme.
Se volete la faccio io.
Foto per le mamme.
Se no la facciamo alla prima stazione.
Anche.
No, non si vede però.
Non si vede fra.
Fra non si è tagliati i capelli.
No, Fra non si è tagliati i capelli.
No, ma ti ricordi quanto ce l'avevano gli altri anni?
Tu ti sei tagliato però non ho messo tagliati il
Ve le mando, ognuno lo mandi alla propria mamma, al proprio papà.
Facciamo un gruppo anche delle mamme di papà. Così non lasciamo tutti soli.
Il parti non le sono sbagliate sicuramente.
In cui loro non possono mandare messaggi. Noi mandiamo solo foto. Sì.
Dei cannoni.
Sì. Ma come, cosa dici?
Solo reagire alle foto.
Sono arrivato secondo.
No, bro, c'ho avuto paura. Fra mi scrive, sono
No.
sotto casa di Simo come per dire sono qua ma lui non c'è.
Ma sai che fai così?
Perché era così.
No, che non fosse.
Here I am leaving Turin Porto-Nuova on this semi-fast Trenitalia service heading towards Genoa. The suburban and semi-fast services, or most of them at least, operating on Trenitalia's network have this rock branding and use a blue, orange and grey colour scheme which kind of works, even though the colours are pretty much opposites.
Non ce l'ho uguale a Fabio, non so. Ah, le borse. Oh, sono arrivato a...
Ma la mia secondo me è meno di 10 kg.
No, io sono arrivato a 11 qualcosa, ma perché avevo 1,2 kg di barrette. Poi lo
Però
tolgo.
tanto quello è esatto, è peso che si toglie. Io ho fatto un po' di peso.
Ah, c'ho delle patatine per oggi per tutti. Ma sì, sti cazzo.
Io ho solo 9 rapporti fissi, ma prima è il
Guarda bro, ma poi è sempre così. Cioè, è sempre così, guarda.
Here I am departing Turin, and by Turin I mean, well, I'm not really in Turin anymore. This was the last of the scenery in the city. So if you want to continue the beautiful journey and to see the beautiful cities of Genoa and Florence, stay tuned for the next video on my European adventure.